Robservations with Robert, Meyer, Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am once again robcasting at you, you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. And it is Robservations episode number 694. My God, 694. Almost to 700, folks. Almost to 700. Well, today, as many of you know, my most eagerly awaited of the upcoming Marvel films dropped. And people have been talking about it. And I find the, first of all, Roger H. just sent a thumbs up sticker. Thank you, Roger H. I feel thumbs up. I had thumbs up on this trailer. So I think people they don't quite know what to make of it. And I'm seeing all kinds of reactions. For instance, the Eternals have been in the shadows. People are like, well, why didn't they interfere and say World War II? Or why didn't they get involved with Thanos during the Infinity conflict? Why weren't they, good point. But why would they be? Why do they have to be? I think it's interesting that people's knee-jerk reactions. I think we are in the midst of a Marvel backlash between Falcon and the Winter Soldier being accused of horrible identity politics, which I actually don't agree with, because they were looking back into comic book stories that have already been published, some almost 20 years ago, that were dealing with these very things. I don't think examining issues of race is necessarily a bad thing. And I thought Isaiah Bradley and Sam Wilson's conflict, for instance, in Falcon and Winter Soldier was definitely something that they should address. And I like the way they did it. Did I like everything in Falcon and Winter Soldier? No, because you could tell that it was sort of a patchwork. They had to redefine what it was going to be after the global pandemic, because I think, as I've been told, from what I understand, it was originally about a global pandemic, so they had to rejigger, reshoot, all of that, which I understand. But the central idea about Sam Wilson, a black man, taking up the mantle of Captain America, and then having a philosophical debate with Isaiah Bradley, who went through horrible things that the United States did to him, and he stood in for all of the Tuskegee experiments and things that actually occurred. So when you're harking back to history, I don't find it to be pandering or deeply involved with identity politics. You're using stuff that actually occurred to comment within the framework of this story to comment on things. But a lot of people took it as identity politics. I didn't see it that way. I saw it as science fiction fantasy delving into our real world issues the way a lot of great science fiction and fantasy does. Now, on the other hand, we have the Eternals. Now, a lot of people don't know anything about the Eternals, but let me first of all, we're now in the midst of a Marvel backlash. Fan backlash, which is to be expected. I mean, after the great heights that I think the entertainment heights that the Marvel Cinematic Universe took us to, and the 1-2 punch of Infinity War and Endgame, which delights me to no end. I mean, those movies were both hugely ambitious, and together, they're some of the greatest achievements in fantasy filmmaking ever. Now, yeah, of course, they're still based on Marvel Comics characters, and if you're not predisposed to being interested in Marvel Comics characters, I can understand why you can look at the Marvel Universe in a sort of a cynical light. I get that. But however, they are supposed to be derivations of Marvel Comics. So I think they do a really good job. People talk about, they're a little too milquetoast, they're a little too one note. I don't know what you're expecting. I mean, we're not making The Godfather here. They're making the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And for what they've done, I think they did a great job. And I think most people, for the most part, the films, sure, there were some that were better than others. But I think overall, holistically, the way they all work together now, and I think it's great entertainment, and it doesn't overreach, and it delivers what it promises. And how often do things do that these days? So anyway, the Eternals. Why am I deliriously excited for the Eternals? Well, I've been an Eternals fan for a long time. I came across them in the 70s, like 77. Here is an omnibus of the original Kirby's Eternals, and which I really, really liked. And then in the mid-aughts, one of my favorite writers, Neil Gaiman, brought us his take on the Eternals, which I also enjoyed. Now, what's really interesting about this Eternals is that in this it came with his original pitch for Neil Gaiman's his original pitch for his take on the characters and his proposal. And I wanted to read the beginning of his proposal for y'all, so you get a sense of what the Eternals actually, who are they? In the beginning, the Celestials landed on Earth. They took a proto-human ape-like creature and they dismantled it, stripping it back to its component DNA. They sampled the results to other experimental subjects, a cave bear, an octopus, a dolphin, a panda. They built the proto-human back up, examined it in ways that we can barely imagine, and then they made their decision. They destroyed the proto-human, and from its cellular information and genetic coding, they produced two templates. One template was a genetic lucky dip and randomizer, the race that humans would come to know as the Deviants, each member of which was unique and different, always in flux, always changing. A mostly short-lived race of monsters and freaks unable to breed true. The other template was Stranger. There are only 200 of them made, and they came off the production line with memories already in place. Built from human genetic code, yet not human. Each of them unchanging, perfect, superhuman in every way. They did not age, and they did not die. The Celestials left. Time passed. The proto-humans became actual humans. Civilizations rose and fell. The Deviants evolved their own brutal civilization, and at one point they enslaved the humans. And despite the best efforts of the Eternals, they seemed unstoppable. The Celestials returned at this point, whether to examine or correct their experiment or change it, no one knows. There was a discussion amongst the Celestials themselves, and one of their number was imprisoned beneath a mountain range on Earth and left here to dream. The dreaming Celestials. No longer would the Deviants rule the humans. The age of Deviants was over. They went literally underground, avoiding contact with humans. The Celestials left Earth, taking with them what they had come for. They would come again. They made certain adjustments to the Eternals at this time as well. The Eternals mopped up, tidied up. They were the Celestials' caretakers on Earth, keeping the world going until the Celestials returned. Never aging, never changing as the years passed, and the centuries and the millennia. The people who saw them believed them to be gods. Now that's just the introduction of Neil Gaiman's proposal for his reboot of the Eternal series. So you kind of get a background on this universe, and I'm sure we're going to get a bit of that in the movie because Marvel has said that it's going to span thousands of years. Now, this is, I think, very interesting. We've not seen anything like this before previously in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, what I dig about it is it's sci-fi concepts, very Eric Von Däniken, Chariots of the Gods, kind of like you could see in the beginning, I think, for those of you who were not reading Eric Von Däniken in the 70s, I did. You might get a bit of a Prometheus vibe on it. Giant ship comes when back in Mesopotamia, early humans and the Eternals show up, and I don't know how they're gonna. I don't know if the Celestials were there or that they had already been changed somewhere else and they came to Earth. It's going to be interesting to see how they play that all out. But I love that there's a race of beings in the Marvel Universe, human beings that were created, messed with, genetically engineered by the Celestials. We've seen Celestials in the Marvel Cinematic Universe before in flashbacks, and also we saw the head of a Celestial in Guardians of the Galaxy. Nowhere where the Collector was, all that place was actually scooped out of the head of a Celestial. So what they're doing is they're the same way we're getting the Time Variance Authority in the Loki series, we're getting these really heady, eternal, cosmic, godlike concepts that are being added to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We're getting more and more layers. They've always been there, but we just haven't focused on them yet. And I think what they're doing, what the Marvel Cinematic Universe is doing, and I think it's very shrewd, whatever they're leading up to, we've got the Multiverse of Madness storylines over here. We've got the Time Variance Authority, which is dealing with time travel and keeping the multiverse straight, or time itself. Then we have the Eternals and the Celestials and the Deviants, which are setting up thousands and thousands and thousands of years of galactic history or universal history. So in my mind, what the Eternals is going to be doing is laying the groundwork for the next wherever we go. Because remember, Phase 3, the end of Phase 3 was, of course, Infinity War, Endgame, and Spider-Man Far From Home. We're still in basically Phase 1. Phase 4 is a new Phase 1. So we're not even anywhere near Phases 2 and 3 yet. But I think that because they know what they're doing, and Kevin Feige knows what he's doing, they're setting the table to build up the groundwork for another massive crossover event. Say what you will, but it's going to be a lot more cosmic, and it's going to be, not that Thanos himself wasn't cosmic, but I think they're taking us to a place that is just going to be much broader in terms of its scope. I mean, even though Thanos snapped his fingers, we went to a few planets, but I really think that what they're doing now is they're just opening up the cosmic portion of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in a much, much, much bigger way, beginning with the Eternals. And of course, while they're predominantly, I'm sure the movie takes place predominantly on Earth, we'll probably see some kind of flashbacks in the beginning, and we'll meet the Celestials, and I hope they deal with the origins of the Eternals in some way, because it's fascinating what they've done. And I'm sure the conflict with the Deviants is going to be front and center of the story. But what was really interesting to me about seeing this trailer is we know that Chloe Zhao, who won the Academy Award for Best Picture, Best Producer, and Best Director, and Frances McDormand won for Best Actress, we're getting a true auteurist sensibility from somebody that's at the top of their game. And now, apparently, Kevin Feige and Louis Esposito and Victoria Alonso really responded to her pitch. And I would assume, just off the top of my head, I would assume that she's coming at this not from, say, the pulp standpoint of it, but the idea of this eternal race and more of the cosmic nature of the universe. And I think, obviously, her Chinese background probably will give her some insight into this, because the Chinese culture is one of the oldest continuously existing cultures on Earth, and they have such a rich history. So I'm sure that her family and being that she's Chinese gave her some unique insight. I'm sure she brought some of that to her proposal for this series. And just knowing and seeing how the movie was shot, and her suggestion that we've read about and talked about before on the show, that the movie doesn't necessarily shoot everything in Atlanta. Let's go on location. And you could tell from the trailer alone that the imagery, the feel of it is very different. I feel that it's going to be a much more grounded movie. We've got a lot of, obviously, where they're shooting the film is quite interesting. Real locations and the natural beauty of the world, the Earth itself, is probably a big part of the way she was approaching these stories. And obviously it looks to have a lot of verisimilitude. And I really liked the cast. I think they all look great. If Kumail Nanjiani is actually playing a Bollywood movie star, I love that. I never thought I would see a Bollywood dance sequence in a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, but if you really think about it, why shouldn't one be in there? I mean, if Marvel's going to delve into every other cinematic genre, why not go Bollywood? As a matter of fact, I wouldn't mind seeing a full-on Bollywood Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. That would be quite interesting. But I saw this trailer, and I look, it's just a teaser. And I know what's so interesting now is we are judging teasers and trailers the way we would judge a whole film, which I've always thought, well, that's kind of odd. I mean, this is a teaser. This is to give us our first taste, our first glimpse. I think, yeah, we can puzzle over it, but it's funny. Now people are judging a teaser or a trailer as if like, well, I felt it was the teaser was boring. What, you mean 60 seconds times 2? When you're seeing all these images and characters and situations you've never seen before, how could that possibly be boring? How could it be boring? You don't have the 120 seconds to like watch something that might not look like every other comic book trailer and immediately you're going to write it off. I find it interesting. And then people are like, well, where are the Eternals? You know, slagging off on the idea of the story of the movie. Like, first of all, if you're a race of the Eternals and you've watched all of human civilization for like the last 10,000 years, and you're not interfering, you're just existing, observing everything. Like, look, how did the Romans and Greeks treat one another? Obviously, they enslaved many other people's populations, you know, in many other countries. They weren't exactly the greatest people in the world. They weren't exactly the most moral people in the world. They did lots of crazy shit. The ancient Egyptians building the pyramids. I mean, I don't know when all that was happening in relation to how long the Eternals have been on the planet, but why would they get involved in things like World War II or World War I or Korea or Vietnam? What would be the point? They're not here necessarily to save us. I think they're here to watch us and look over us. It's not their job to police us. Or is it? We'll have to find out how the movie accepts it or portrays it. But I have to say, I mean, I'm very excited. I watched this and I'm like, this looks quite unique to me, and it was everything I hoped for from this trailer, and I found it to be very, very intriguing. And more than that, I really appreciate that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is doing other things. I mean, obviously, I think this is the case of like a Guardians of the Galaxy, and at least I hope. I have very high hopes for this movie. I'm willing to go all in on this. Maybe it doesn't work. I even had friends of mine in the industry. One person said, I'm not going to say who said this, but I got a text after the trailer dropped from somebody I greatly respect. And here's what they said. The Eternals will be Marvel's first disaster. You heard it here first. Angelina Jolie is talking so slowly because that is the only way she can hold that terrible accent. I don't know. I thought that was Salma Hayek. I'm not sure. But, already the knives are out and sharpened and ready to call this movie an unmitigated disaster. I didn't see that in this trailer at all. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm really excited about it. And of all the Marvel, I mean, we know what we get with Spider-Man. We know what we're going to get with Black Widow. We know what we're going to get with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. We can probably guess. But this film looks very, very different to me. And I'm very curious to see where it goes. I mean, clearly you've got a relationship. There was more romance in this, more lyricism in this trailer than any of the other Marvel trailers I've seen. So I'm very interested to see where they're going to go. I, for one, am very excited. I wanted to read an article I found about this trailer. It was in Gizmodo today. James Whitbrook posted this an hour ago. The first teaser trailer for Chloe Zhao's Eternal doesn't really have much to tell us about why now is the time for Marvel's mighty immortal race to emerge out of the shadows and bring their eon-spanning fight to the forefront, but it does give us our first solid look at just which of Jack Kirby's esoteric creations will be in the spotlight. So here's our trailer breakdown to guide to sort your Icaruses from your Fatosi. The teaser opens with a small village of humans gazing in awe as a massive flat wedge of a starship uncloaks, the Eternals making landfall, revealing themselves to the people they're meant to spend the rest of time defending. Outside of its unique design, we don't know much about the vessel other than what some may have seen through leaked images of the film's tie-in Lego sets. After all, Eternals was due out last year. That's ostensibly called the Domo. That name in and of itself does have a connection to Marvel Comics, however. Domo was the Eternals' prime administrator and the right hand of the prominent leader in Eternal Society, Zuras. Domo managed important business from the being's capital on Olympia, which was literally accessed through a wormhole above Mount Olympus in Greece. Who are the Eternals? Our first glimpse of some of those actual Eternals comes in the form of Circe, Gemma Chan, and Icarus, Richard Madden, who look out upon their new neighbors with a sense of awe. It makes sense that they're our first characters. They are arguably the most important of all the Eternals. Icarus, whose abilities, granted by the cosmic omnipotent beings known as the Celestials, who created both the Eternals and the Deviants thousands and thousands of years ago when they arrived on Earth, include everything from flight to low-level telepathy to matter transmutation and energy projection, is arguably one of the most famous of the obscure immortals. He's the primary leader of the Eternals as a superhero team when they first emerged in the pages of Kirby's Eternals 1 in '76, and has been a prominent figure in their interactions with the outside world ever since. Let's see, as I continue reading. Circe, meanwhile, whose powers are similar... I don't know. Please don't do that. Why do you have to do this? I hate that they slide over there and I can't read. Damn it. Damn it all. Well, you'll go off the page. Circe, meanwhile, whose powers are similar to Icarus, is beyond the standard nigh-on invulnerability and immortality all Eternals have. They're particularly focused on her abilities to teleport people and transmute objects to a degree beyond most Eternals. Played a major focal role in the short-lived revival of the comic series in 2006 by Neil Gaiman and John Romita Jr. There, Circe lived her life as a human, having had her memory of being an Eternal wiped, and returned to her for a new conflict between the Eternals and Deviants. She's actually lived a life much more public than most of her kind, having been a prominent Avenger for a period, as well as having some long, complicated relationships with the character we meet much later in the trailer, Dane Whitman, played by Kit Harington, a.k.a. the Black Knight, also formerly an Avenger. Our next rapid-fire glimpse of Eternals also introduces us to how Chloe Zhao's movie will visually portray the being's transmutation abilities, golden strands of energy that they each manipulate through different ways to form objects or layers of projection or protection around them. We get brief glimpses here of Thena, Angelina Jolie, Ajax, Salma Hayek, Phastos, Brian Tyree, and briefly Sprite, Leah McHugh in the background, who we'll see more of later. Let's start off with Thena, described by Marvel as a fierce warrior. The daughter of Zuros and Prime Eternal after one of his many deaths, Thena was born Azura, but had her name changed to Thena in honor of a peace deal between the Olympian pantheon and the Eternals. Aside from all the standard Eternals powers, Thena's expertise in martial combat, having spent her long life learning strategy and techniques from thousands of years of Earth's warrior cultures. Ajax, who is male in the comic books, is known as the speaker to the Celestials, the eternal liaison with their creators when they were first made. Aside from a history of sort being screwed over in the comics, he's been murdered a few times and even turned into a horrifying monster killer. There's not much more to Ajax outside of their cool relationship with most of the other Eternals. What is that gold shimmery stuff? Phastos, meanwhile, is the Eternals' prime technologist, a master craftsman who helped forge the Eternal Society's advanced technology, gear, and weaponry. In spite of his legacy as a master forge smith and weapons maker, creating himself a mystical hammer to complement his energy manipulation abilities, Phastos himself did not care for Eternal involvement in conflict or with outside species. In the movie, he'll also become one of Marvel Studios' first explicitly queer characters, to not be played by a Russo brother at least, being married to a currently unknown character played by Haas Slyman and sharing the first on-screen gay kiss in the franchise. After a few moments of seeing the Eternals live their lives alongside humanity, basically becoming godlike beings to a new civilization in the process, we do get to see a few more additions to the team. Briefly glimpsed alongside Icarus and Thena, here are Gilgamesh, Center, played by Don Lee, Makari, played by Lauren Ridloff, and Kingo, played by Kumail Nanjiani. We don't see much of Gilgamesh elsewhere, so let's start with him. In the comics, he has a long history as an outcast of Eternal Society, declared the Forgotten One for his history of going against the Eternal's strict non-intervention policies, which get noted in this teaser. The one-time King of Summer had an ancient warrior, or Sumer, had an ancient warrior leader who quested across the Western Asia and Europe, helping humanity and waging conflict. Gilgamesh eventually returned to his people after discovering his true nature as one of their kind. Makari, meanwhile, another character whose gender was changed for the movie, is known for their super speed, and you can see in the piles of books being rapidly skimmed through here. Like Phastos, Makkari is a keen engineer and prominent crafter, channeling their knowledge into crafting vehicles and other transportation for the Eternals, even if they preferred using their abilities as one of the fastest superhumans on Earth. Ridloff, who is deaf, will be portraying Makkari as Marvel's first deaf hero. Before we get to Kingo, later in the trailer, we're introduced to another major figure from Eternals comic history in the form of young Sprite, the aforementioned Leah McHugh, and another gender change for the film, although the recently started Eternals comic has likewise resurrected Sprite in female form. Sprite is a somewhat antagonistic force in Eternals comic history, although not necessarily villainous. They're more of a trickster figure akin to Loki, utilizing their ability to craft powerful illusions to confound opponents. Forever trapped in their youthful bodies, Sprite has repeatedly tried to find ways to use their power and that of the Celestials to age into an adult form, including, as detailed in the previously mentioned 2006 series, using the powers of a dreaming Celestial to wipe the minds of almost every Eternal, letting them live as normal humans in society in an attempt to see if it would allow them to grow into an adult body. Is there a villain? Next up is Druig, Barry Kogan, described by Marvel as an aloof loner. In the comics, Druig, Icarus' cousin, and from the subset of Eternals who were raised in what would become modern Siberia in the city of Polaria, is much more explicitly antagonistic. Known as the Lord of Flames and Nightmares, Druig was obsessed with power and eternally envious of Icarus for his close relationship with Druig's father, Vulcan. After being killed during an assassination attempt on Icarus, Druig was eventually resurrected and imprisoned, only to be inadvertently let free to roam the world and use his expertise in telepathy and torture to manipulate his way into ruling his own nation in the form of the former Soviet annexed republic of Vorosika. But interestingly, the Eternals teaser seemingly casts Druig as more of a friendly face, as we see him participating in what appears to be a very important power from the Eternals comic history, the forming of a unimind. In the comics, if multiple Eternals, as few as 3 or many more beyond that, link their minds in a special ritual, they could utilize the Celestials' more powerful gift bestowed upon their species, the ability to summon a unimind. A gestalt being of unimaginable power, uniminds are combined essences of pure energy, a hive mind intelligence that can be used as either an almighty construct of war, or in some cases a democratic conclave to make decisions affecting eternal society. At last, then, we get a brief glimpse of Nanjiani in action as Kingo, both in his guise as a Bollywood celebrity in human society and battling what seems to be a group of possessed civilians. In the comics, Kingo is actually an Eternal from conclaves that were founded in what would become Japan, where he eventually found a home and developed his skills as a samurai and master swordsman, eschewing many of his fellow Eternals' special abilities. As time passed and humanity grew, Kingo eventually leveraged his skill in his home nation to become a major action movie star, specializing in samurai movies in between serving a role in Eternal society. So is Game of Thrones' Kit Harington an Eternal? The last major character we're introduced to isn't actually an Eternal, but a human. But they do have a long, complicated history in Marvel Comics. Briefly glimpsed with Cersei and other humans looking up at a stormy sky in the teaser's climax, we meet Kit Harington's previously mentioned Dane Whitman. Marvel Studios is staying particularly quiet about Dane's role in Eternals, but he's actually a figure from the comics, the fantastical, magical medieval hero known as the Black Knight. Starting out in Marvel's pre-Marvel history as Atlas Comics, the Black Knight was originally a strictly medieval hero with no special abilities, but a magic sword called the Ebony Blade. Years later, the mantle was borrowed by small-time Iron Man villain Nathan Garrett, before Garrett's nephew, Dane, took the legacy himself in an attempt to redeem his ancestors' history as a legendary hero. Dane worked as the Black Knight alongside both the Avengers and the Defenders, but his primary connection to the world of the Eternals is as a major romantic interest of Cersei. Long, complicated story short, Dane and Cersei find themselves targeted by a villain named Proctor, who actually turned out to be an alternate version of Dane from elsewhere in the multiverse. Jealous of his own Cersei spurning him, Proctor had plans to kill every version of her throughout the multiverse. During this time, Icarus bonded Cersei and Dane's spirits in an attempt to protect Cersei in an eternal ritual called the Gan Josen, but after Dane almost cheated on her with fellow Avenger and Inhuman Princess Crystal, like we said, long story, things went a little wrong. There's much more to their history together, and how much of it makes it into the Eternals movie, or even Dane's status as the Black Knight, remains to be seen. And so Eternals' first fleeting teaser doesn't really have much beyond that. While we're introduced to our cast of would-be Avengers replacements, we don't really get much of a reason as to why now they're making moves publicly after eons of secrecy. We're also not introduced to the threat we know they're facing, the mysterious deviants, who have a long and equally tangled history in Marvel's cosmic comics as aberrations created by the same celestial tinkering that got us the Eternals in the first place. But there's plenty of time to get to know more about the Eternals, and its heroes definitely seem like the kind of godlike folks that prefer taking the time to reveal themselves. So, there you go. I thought that article did a pretty good job of giving you a little bit of intriguing Eternals backstory, and it would be my hope after hearing that you all will be saying, wow, there's a lot going on in this movie. I hope there's a lot going on in this movie. I have high hopes. I really do. I have very, very high hopes for this movie, and I think we're going to be getting something especially, first of all, an Academy Award-winning director. Coming off her Academy Award win this year, they'd already made this movie. And I think that it's pretty great. And I, for one, am incredibly excited. I'm incredibly excited for this. And I'm really looking forward to seeing this movie. So, there you go. Yeah. Mad Villainy writes in. Mad Villainy writes in and says, "Hello, Rob and company. Don't ask me why, but I recently watched the trailer for Hotel Transylvania 4. It was fine. No, it wasn't actually fine. In fact, it made me inexplicably sad. The director of the Hotel Transylvania movies, Genndy Tartakovsky, has been one of the driving forces bringing respect to animation over the past 20-odd years. He's been the main creative force behind shows like Dexter's Lab, Samurai Jack, and Star Wars Clone Wars, not to be confused with Star Wars The Clone Wars. And to top it all off, he made the best adult cartoon in recent memory with the critically acclaimed Primal, having a perfect 100% score on Rotten Tomatoes. I guess what bothers me so much is that this artistic powerhouse of animation has been relegated to the Hotel Transylvania guy. Genndy Tartakovsky has been working with Sony over a decade now, and they've let him make are Hotel Transylvania movies, and not for lack of Genndy wanting to do more. He's had several movies in production or pre-production over at Sony over the years, all of which have been canceled by the suits. So it begs the question, why does he keep working there? I know you aren't able to answer that particular question, as it's incredibly specific to Tartakovsky. So instead, I would like to take the rest of this letter to implore anyone listening to this to watch Primal. The story of Primal is one of survival and coping with loss, and although I haven't snapped any dinosaur necks in recent memory, the themes of this show still hit hard after the events of last year. Oh, and lest I forget, it's also about dinosaurs, and it doesn't have any words. So if an epic yet truly sweet and emotional story with tons of literal gut-wrenching violence and no dialogue sounds up your alley, then please give this show a chance. I promise you won't regret it. Or maybe you will, because art is subjective and all that bullcrap, but I certainly hope that if you do check it out, you will enjoy it. Sincerely, the Post-Geek Singularity's animation-loving villain, Mad Villainy. Mad Villainy, first of all, gots to get paid. One of the things that's really frustrating in Hollywood, and I can attest to this, is over the course of a Hollywood career, anyone, myself, any other filmmakers you know, for every project they might get made, there are probably dozens that they've tried to get off the ground and they can't. And so when you find somebody that's willing to continue to support your work, like, for instance, making Hotel Transylvania movies, that's a way to get work done. That's a way to have money is people are paying you, and you're getting your stuff made. And that can only be a beautiful thing, because, man, I cannot tell you how frustrating it is. You sit around, you're like, why am I not working on this? Why am I not making these things right now? And we should be. And a lot of creators aren't, because for all of your creativity, unless somebody banks on you, you don't get to make anything. And nobody wants that. Everybody wants to continue working. So I think maybe if I could speak for him, and I can't because I don't know him, but if I could venture a guess, it's because he gets to make the things that he wants to make, which that is a rare indeed thing. This one comes from our friend Stubble McShave, all the way from Sweden. Hi, Rob. The other day on the John Campea show, someone asked if a movie got better when the characters were more active. You guys answered it, and I thought I'd put my thoughts in on the matter. If characters have a high proactivity, as in being more active, the movie is not the issue. You can have a good movie where the protagonist isn't all that proactive. Proactivity is an important part of what makes character interesting, though. We like to see our heroes do stuff to solve the situation. The same goes for our villains. We like when they're very ruthless and active in achieving their goals. However, proactivity isn't the only thing that makes a character interesting. I've tried to break it down into different categories. There are literally dozens of categories, but let's stick to 6 categories of what makes a character interesting in terms of personal qualities. As I said, there are more, and these 6 can be broken down further. So, here goes. The first one I thought I'd mention is basically how likable a character is, how nice the person is. You score high in this category if you walk up to a puppy and bend down to pet it and scratch its ears. If you, on the other hand, walk up to a puppy and kick it down to a ditch, you get a very low score on the likability niceness factor. The second one is competence, also referred to as the superhuman category. This is the category of how powerful someone is. That could be in raw strength, special abilities, or even big sums of money and tech, which makes you more effective in your endeavors. The third one is often in opposition to the superhuman category, and that is the everyman category, which describes how much the average person directly can relate to the character. Sometimes you can have a high value in both of these categories. Examples would be Superman, where he's also Clark Kent for a good portion of the movie, or Luke Skywalker, where we've seen him going from a very relatable young boy who has very little power to a powerful individual who scores high on the competency category. Now we come to the proactivity category. We like to see people try and get out of a sticky situation even if they fail. Example, Han Solo in more or less every Star Wars movie, or if it's a villain, we like to see Darth Vader or Boba Fett be extra ruthless and efficient in their efforts to capture our heroes. Harrison Ford has made a career of playing characters that are somewhat competent with a high level of relatability and proactivity. Psychological complexity is the 5th category I've selected. Batman and his rogues gallery all score high on psychological complexity. Batman also scores high on superhuman incompetence because of his analytical ability, his wealth, and his advanced technology. Finally, there's loyalty and friendship. The one that shoots up the top of this category is Samwise Gamgee. He's a superhuman when it comes to being a loyal, good friend who does everything because of his love and friendship to his master. The category also covers the loyalty of evil henchmen to their masters, but to a lesser degree. This category could certainly be broken down further, but I've given Darth Vader a point or two in it for his loyalty to the Emperor. You can use these scores to analyze why you like a certain character, or maybe what you need to do to make a character more interesting and fascinating for the consumer of the book or the movie. So, Rob, what do you think of this, and is there something you think I've missed? I've attached a file with the scores for characters that I've mentioned. I've made it in 15 minutes, so there may be some mistakes along the way. Can you think of any other characters from pop culture, and what scores would you give them? Maybe do one of the Star Trek captains or something. Well, I think that's very interesting. I did not download this this list, but I think you, Stubble, you've given us a great list. I totally agree with most of what you're saying. I mean, look, to me, what makes a great character? Well, those traits that you gave them are good, and I agree with a lot of those things. I never have quite thought of it in those kind of terms, but for me, the thing that makes the characters most memorable, my favorite characters, are the ones that I would just say that are the most human. And alien characters can be human as well, but I mean human in terms of relatability. Like all those traits that you have, to me, it's like, are they truthful? Are the characters truthful? If you have someone who's an anti-hero, even if they're a really despicable human being, if they're despicable in a way that you can either recognize or understand or comprehend, and they feel like they're genuine, they feel like they could actually exist. Well, that's what I like. I mean, I like those believable characters that make you understand who and what they are, even if those characters are doing bad things. So my characters, I think my favorite characters are the ones that best illuminate the human condition. Whether they're evil, whether they're good, characters overall that help us understand what it means to be human and allow us to relate to them for that reason. Those, to me, in my mind, are my favorite kinds of characters. So, yeah, that's basically what I think of as being great characters. What a great letter, though. I really enjoyed that letter. So thank you for that one. This is an interesting one. This was actually from a couple days ago, but Omar94 writes in and says, "Hi, Rob, moderators in the Post-Geek Singularity. Another movie anniversary is upon us. May 22nd, 2021 is the 25th year anniversary of Brian De Palma's Mission Impossible, which was released on May 22nd, 1996. Having been in development for quite some time with several different people involved, like Oscar-winning filmmaker of movies like Tootsie, The Way We Were, Out of Africa, and 3 Days of the Condor, Sidney Pollack, the screenwriting duo of American Graffiti and Temple of Doom, William Hayek and Gloria Katz, William Huck, Oscar-winning screenwriter of Schindler's List, Steve Zalian, screenwriter of Jurassic Park and Carlito's Way, David Koepp, and Oscar-winning screenwriter of Chinatown, Robert Towne. The film finally made it to theaters in 1996 under Brian De Palma's direction with a script by Koepp and Towne. Also, one interesting note, this film marks the first producing credit for Tom Cruise. Starring in the film alongside Cruise were John Voight, Ving Rhames, Jean Reno, and Emilio Estevez in a small role. The movie went on to become a huge success, joining the top 10 highest-grossing films of 1996, along with another Tom Cruise starring film, Jerry Maguire. The success of the film led to a franchise which still continues, since there is a 7th and 8th film coming. As the franchise has continued over the years, only 2 people have remained from the very beginning, Tom Cruise and Ving Rhames. Thanks, and live long and prosper. It's amazing that franchise is still going after 25 years and only 7 entries, and I think now it's sort of going, and we're seeing the zenith of the Mission Impossible franchise. I thought Rogue Nation and Fallout were the best of the series, and I have to say I've quite enjoyed these movies. All of them, even some are better than others, but I've enjoyed them, and I love the Ethan Hunt character, and I think it's great. Our friend writes in a letter, and she says, "Dear Robert," or "Hi Robert, in 2019 I became a fan of the hit Disney TV series The Mandalorian, along with millions of other fans. The story, depictions of the Star Wars universe, and the overall appeal of the show made me an instant fan. In particular, I was taken by the sweet relationship that the baby Yoda, a.k.a. the child, a.k.a. Grogu, developed with the lead character, Din Djarin. So when Sideshow Collectibles announced they would be creating a life-size 1-to-1 scale figure of the child, I immediately placed my order in January of 2020. I received the life-size The Child in November of 2020, and I was pleased at how good it looked. I had great expectations for this figure because the figure was designed by Legacy Effects that made the original Baby Yoda for the TV series. Overall, I love how they created such a lifelike statue, but there was limited movement in the figure. After all, it was a statue meant for a collector to admire and was not fully articulated. As if answering my prayers, Hot Toys announced in the spring of 2020 that they would be creating their version of the child, and that their version of Grogu that they would be making would be far more articulated than the Sideshow Grogu. This new 1-to-1 scale version of the child could sit or stand, had interchangeable ears and hands, and remarkably could open and close his mouth, just like Grogu does in the TV series. I immediately placed my first order for the Hot Toys The Child, and over the course of a year, I paid off the amount. Good for you. That's what we do. That's what we Hot Toys collectors do. You pay in advance, you pay it off, and by the time it shows up, you hopefully have paid it off. Paid off the amount and eagerly awaited the arrival of a more articulated Grogu. You can then imagine how shocked I was to find out that after watching several online reviewers of Hot Toys the Child, there appeared to be a flaw in the figure. It turned out that if the mouth was manipulated in a certain way, left closed, then the jaw would split right above the neck, exposing the joint in the neck. An online reviewer advised, leave his mouth open because the rubber is delicate. Justin, our man Justin from Justin's Collectibles, I wondered, how could a $400 Hot Toys break or tear so easily? Some other YouTubers mentioned that the mix of plastic to rubber might be making the material over the jaw less pliable, increasing the tendency of the skin to break. What do you do when you order a collectible that seems to have a potentially visible flaw? My last payment is on May 20th, 2021. Any advice you can give would be greatly appreciated. Well, I would say this. If there is that much of a notable flaw, you can either do one of two things. Obviously, you've made a decision, but if you buy it, well, then you have to put up with it, and I guess just leave his mouth open. Basically, a one-to-one scale figure is really meant to be enjoyed anyway from afar. It's not something you're going to necessarily play with, depending on what you want. I mean, I think the options of removable ears and giving him different expressions, you just knowing that going in, you just have to be mindful of it. If you're okay, if you still want what Hot Toys is giving you, or I would cancel it. I would just not get it. It's one of those two things. I mean, look, one of the things that happens with toys a lot of the time, especially figures, they're made of material that can break down. Sometimes rubber gets sticky and sweating over the years, and it just doesn't hold up. The first iteration of the Ed 209 from Hot Toys, the rubbery cowl on the front, all of them, they tended to split after a while. And that was really annoying. They reissued the Ed 209. It's much better now, but mine hasn't split yet. So these things they kind of happen with toys. I mean, it's unfortunate that there's this kind of a fault. You would think that they would, during quality control, would have figured this out. But unfortunately, if they don't, you're kind of SOL, which is kind of a bummer. And yeah. And I don't know what to tell you other than, what did you decide? I don't know what you decided, but it would be interesting to hear what you did decide. Well, let's see. I think I'm going to jump over and find out what you guys are doing. What are you saying? And what's on your minds? I do not know. Willow's here. Willow says, according to a recent survey asking people which animals they think they can beat in a fist fight. Who's the person that came up with that? 28% of the respondents don't think they can beat a rat, while 8% think they can beat an elephant. Well, first of all, how do you beat an elephant when they don't have any fists? I mean, that's odd. What do? Box his nose? His trunk? What's the strongest animal that you think you can take on? You know what? I think I could go toe-to-toe with a kangaroo. If I'm going to box an animal, I'm going to try and box an animal that knows at least something about boxing. I'm going to go with the kangaroo. I think that's what I'm doing. Yeah. So there you go. I choose a kangaroo, Willow. What that says about me, I don't know. But they're pretty big. And I've watched them box. They're formidable. I would imagine they'd put up a good fight. I'd probably get my bell rung a couple of times if I fought one. So what are you going to do? Mexican, Chrysla has subscribed to the channel. Thank you, Chrysla. Mexican Iron Man. Hello, sir. How are you? I have no idea what to do with this Eternals trailer. Never heard of the Eternals until now. I don't have faith in Marvel, but I'm still a fan of my simulation universe ex-wife, Salma Hayek. Giggity, Rob. Look, Salma Hayek, I like that. Simulation universe ex-wife. I'd like to have her be my simulation universe wife. Who wouldn't? Ever since she appeared as Satanica Pandemonia, isn't that her name? In From Dusk Till Dawn. I mean, wow, she is definitely one of the more beautiful women to have ever graced our movie screens. I really like her. I like that she's in this movie playing this role. I think it's great. I think the cast, even though she's one of the race or gender swapped characters, I don't care. I think that's fine. I'm looking forward to it. 200 Watt Studio says, I missed a super chat from yesterday's Let's Get Physical Media. It was a $10 super chat about True Romance. Well, 200 Watt Studio, let's go back there and find it, and see if I can find it. Here it is. 200 Watt Studio said yesterday on Let's Get Physical Media, Hail Dieter and Rob, I ordered True Romance on Zavvi. My order is still there, but can't search Zavvi and order it anymore. Only on Arrow. Any insight into why you can order the set on Arrow but not Zavvi? I would imagine Zavvi bought Arrow, and maybe it'll pop up again. But Zavvi purchased Arrow, according to certain sources in the government. The sale, I guess, has gone through. So maybe they just want to bolster the sale through Arrow first. I'm not sure. I noticed they had different covers as well on Zavvi. So maybe they just want to make sure that Arrow is taken care of. Other than that, I really don't have any insight into that. So, and I apologize for missing your super chat yesterday. I don't know why I missed that, because I remember that super chat. But now we covered it. The Directorial Lifeform sends in a super chat and says, Hail, Rob in the chat. I have a video to celebrate the 44th anniversary of Star Wars original trilogy premiering at 6 Central. May the Force be with you all. Yeah, actually, that would be tomorrow, right? May 25th, 1977, the 44th anniversary of Star Wars. Can you believe Star Wars is 44 years old? It is. Yeah. Bruh, sends in a tip and says, if it were revealed on June 1st that aliens frequently visit our planet, would you be hopeful, fearful, or unconcerned for mankind's safety? I'd be hopeful, as my friend once put it. Don't worry, if there are aliens, they're probably smarter than us. Well, you know what? Look, I'd love to see aliens, because how can you not be a fan of science fiction, fantasy, and horror and not want to meet aliens? I would definitely want to meet aliens. I absolutely would want to meet aliens. Faux show. Would they be benevolent aliens? I mean, I'm more of the opinion that if there in fact are aliens that have been zipping around our planet, and they have the kind of technology that we have that somebody said is at least 1,000 years more advanced than us, they probably don't really care about us. If anything, we're a curiosity to them. But I think it would also mean that if there are aliens that are able to visit our planet, let's assume they're aliens. Well, that means that that leaves me hopeful that if they've got technology to come here, of all the places in the universe, there's probably a universe out there that we're unaware of that is teeming with other kinds of life. And I'm all for it. I hope we get to meet them and interact with them, because, yes, they're probably way more advanced and smarter than we are, but maybe also they're on a long recce reconnoitering our planet. Maybe they're going to take us out before we get too big for our britches, or maybe they just find our. I mean, look, if you were an alien race that was 1,000 years more advanced than us technologically, and actually were watching what's going on this planet over the course of decades, I think you'd be very puzzled with just how dumb we are, and how much we work in our own. We work against our own best interests. I can't imagine that something like that would be something that people. That aliens would. I don't know. I mean, look, I'd like to meet aliens. I just don't know if we ever will. I don't know if they're ever going to take the time and reveal themselves to us, because they clearly know we're aware of them. They don't seem to be too concerned the way these new unidentified aerial phenomenon. UFOs are now UAPs. So I don't know. I mean, maybe. So there you go. Louis Terrasas said, what's with me skipping super chats? I don't know. Louis, my friend Louis says, Robster, you skipped some of my super chats recently, but I'm so excited about Eternals. At the end of the day, it'll all come back to aliens. The MCU was started by extraterrestrials. Like Donovan said, we are the result of a hybridization experiment. Maybe. I mean, I don't know. If that's true, maybe so. I mean, if you find out that we've been seeded, it's certainly not an idea that we're unfamiliar with. Eric Von Donigan talked about it. Ridley Scott certainly has talked about it. There's been many different ideas that there were aliens before us seeding our planet with life. But as Gene Roddenberry said, you know what? Aliens were not here before us. We built the pyramids because we're awesome and we're able to do things like that. So what can I say? It is exciting, though. I'd love to know or love to think that there are aliens. I don't know, maybe if we didn't evolve and we were actually seeded here, that'd be kind of cool, that we're an alien science project that's ongoing. That means they are perhaps watching out for us. My curiosity about it would be why? What were they hoping to achieve? I would like to think that if we did venture out into the stars, they'd be proud of us, and that's what they wanted us to do. I wouldn't want them to think, oh, well, now they're getting too big for their britches. Let's destroy the Earth and make way for an intergalactic bypass. Send the Vogon constructor fleet. End of the planet. I hope that doesn't happen. Mr. Intellectual says, one of two. Sir Rob, I have to say I've enjoyed you and Sir Campia's focus on the financial implication perspective of Hollywood, except that I find the focal point being overlooked. This isn't anything like before. I say again, Hollywood is under serious harm. I don't know if Hollywood's under serious harm. I think the old way that Hollywood did business and the old way that Hollywood works is under serious harm, but it's been slowly chipped away at for the last 25 years because as Hollywood's been taken over by Ivy League business grads that look good on a corporate hiring spreadsheet, I think the emphasis has been taken away from creators. And it was, 30 years ago when I was working in feature production at Warner Brothers, and I was in the executive, I was in and out of all the creative executives and vice presidents' offices at Warner Brothers and became friends with a lot of them. And some of them were quite good, but others were, storytelling wasn't their primary focus. And what's weird is that you've got development executives that are dealing with creatives that spend years sometimes developing their ideas. They work with these executives. And a lot of times I'm not saying there aren't very good executives, but then the executives, their job is not to let you make your projects. Their jobs is to say no, 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 and maybe a few times a year say yes. And I think what's interesting is that makes it counterproductive. I'd rather have the power be put in the creatives' hands, the people that actually make the movies. Although I think you need checks and balances as well, and that's something that needs to happen, I think. Alex Tapia says, hey, Rob, first time writing, and I'm a big fan. What's a prediction of a character never seen before in the MCU we could see of the Marvel Comics universe that they could show in this movie, cosmic or Earthbound? Ooh, well, that's a tough question, because there's a lot of characters. Let me just look something up and tell you. The Living Tribunal. I wouldn't mind seeing the Living Tribunal. That's a pretty good one. And maybe Eternity or Infinity Abraxas. I would like to see that. But, who knows? Have we seen Living... I don't know. Have we seen him glimpsed? Do we see the Living Tribunal glimpsed? I think the Living Tribunal would be kind of cool. For those of you who don't know, the Living Tribunal was a vastly powerful humanoid cosmic entity who has existed as long as the universe itself. Its function is to safeguard the multiverse, the sum total of all universes, from an imbalance of mystical forces. It may act to prevent one universe from amassing more power than any of the others, or from upsetting the cosmic balance in some way. The Tribunal may also act to prevent an overwhelming imbalance of good or evil within a universe. When a matter involves only one universe, the Tribunal may leave the final judgment to the abstract entities there. In Earth's 616 universe, Lord Chaos and Master Order, the Living Tribunal doesn't possess alternate counterparts, as there is only one Living Tribunal in the multiverse. However, he does or can exist simultaneously in multiple planes of reality, giving the appearance of multiple variations to the human perception. I think we might see the Living Tribunal, maybe in the Multiverse of Madness. It wouldn't surprise me, because Sam Raimi's the kind of guy that would say, hey, maybe it would happen. Oh, you know what? Mr. Intellectual, let me go back and do that again, because I was confused. Mr. Intellectual, I was reading one of two, because Todd Michaels, one of two. Sorry. Let me go back and do this again. Mr. Intellectual, Sir Rob, I have to say I've enjoyed you and Sir Campion's focus on the financial implication perspective of Hollywood, except that I find the focal point being overlooked. This isn't anything like before, I say again. Hollywood is under serious harm from China. The dismissiveness shown today is a great example of how this is a divergent point in a long storied industry. Your one guest put it well, how this isn't a traditional strategy shift, and others are learning how intense this will get soon. That's very different. Okay, Mr. Intellectual, let me jump into that. Yes, I agree with what you said. Look, China is a totalitarian regime, and while as it's been explained to me, and as I've seen people explain it, they run the company like it's like the mafia in a way. They run the country. They're an oppressive regime, and we are kowtowing to authoritarian rule. Why? Because of how much money that they own on us and how much money they can generate for us if we put out our movies there. We are willing, I mean, it drives me nuts to see how some people in this country will scream bloody murder about the Palestinians and go after Israel for their perceived human rights violations or, oh, it's an apartheid state or whatever. But yet we're willing to do all kinds of business with China that actually is an existential threat to the United States. So I think you're right. And the fact that we're actually making our movies, we're not making our movies more palatable to the Chinese people. We're making our movies more palatable to the Chinese government. And I think you're absolutely right. I think the fact that we self-censor to get our movies to be played in China, that is some scary stuff. And I get it. I mean, corporations like Disney you need those Chinese dollars. But I think in a way, it is sort of very distressing that we will bend the knee to a communist totalitarian regime simply because they play our films. And I think it is very, very, very dangerous. Very dangerous. And I think you're absolutely right about that. Absolutely right. Todd Michael sends in a tip and says, enough about the Eternals, man. How about that $65 million mansion on today's NS? I haven't watched that video yet. Love that internal house waterfall wall, that garage, those insanely huge showers, and who doesn't need a $250,000 olive tree inside their house? Great views. But seriously, though, back to some geek nerd talk. The one thing I think we can at least say about the Eternals is that this will not be the Inhumans. By gods, that was a major Marvel crap fest of epic proportions. It was, Todd Michael. I hope it gets better. I haven't watched Iness's video. We usually watch them at night. Haven't seen today's, but that sounds pretty damn epic. So that's exciting. I'm excited about that. Terrier Tiberius Mork says, I know squat about the Eternals, but as ever, I want every movie to be awesome. I'm going to see it, and I will save my hate or praise for the afterview. Terrier, that is my philosophy of life. It is pointless to hate on something you have yet to see. Wait till you can see it and make up your own mind. Gary Rippin, Vic Kai, or Key, and Forrest Lawrenceston have all subscribed to the channel. Well, thank you all. Welcome to the Post-Geek Singularity. Nick Parrish, by the way, if you want to become members of the channel for even as low as $1 a month, we had another great barn burner of a Zoom call despite the technical difficulties over the weekend. It was great to again see all you, hang out with you beautiful people for 5 hours again? What's up, Rob? So we're not talking about Fast 9 making $64 million in just 8 markets, I see. Even though one of those 8 markets is the mega country China, that's still news given the movie hasn't opened in the US, Japan, and most of Europe yet. $1 billion, Rob? Well, you know what? To be honest, I'm very happy. I'm always happy. As everyone knows, I was not happy with the movie. But I'm always happy when things make money and people are doing well. That's always beneficial as far as the business is concerned. So I'm all about that. And I think maybe it can make $1 billion. It wouldn't surprise me. The Fast and the Furious franchise is a stalwart moneymaker in that respect. So absolutely, I'm happy. And yes, it made a lot of money, $164 million in just 8 markets. People love those movies, so it's amazing. A 200-watt studio sends in a super chat and says, The Killer is up for sale tomorrow on you-know-where. So 200-watt studio, I have to say I've got good news. So, Hong Kong Rescue is basically one guy in his basement who is making new versions of our favorite Hong Kong movies, whether they're Jackie Chan movies, John Woo movies. He's already done Hard Boiled, and his beloved, our beloved, The Killer, Chow Yun-fat starring as The Killer in John Woo's movie The Killer, which is a masterpiece. Hong Kong Rescue has done 3 versions of the movie. 3 different versions. I've only ever seen one. And that is going up for sale tomorrow. And, you know, I've heard the guy who runs Hong Kong Rescue is, he's a little prickly, I've heard, but his work is great. Now, I ordered his version of Pink Floyd's The Wall, and I ordered his version of Hard Boiled on December 6th. And I had sent him a few emails, and he had not been responsive. But lo and behold, you know, 5 months later, 6 months later, whatever, 5.5 months later, almost 6 months later, they arrived today. So I'm going to actually be able to put on Hard Boiled and take a look. Confidence is very high. And tomorrow, The Killer goes up for pre-order, and you bet your bottom dollar I will be pre-ordering that shit. So, El Necron sends in a super chat and says, "Hey, Rob, you skipped a super chat of mine on Midnight Metal once, but you were getting hammered, so that was fucking metal." By the way, we had Saturday night's Midnight Metal was incredible. We first had Andre from Midnight's Edge, then Brett Pierce joined Dave Parker and I, and we came up with something. We might do it. We decided to launch a telethon between June and October 31st to raise $6,666,000 to produce 3 $2.2 million horror films. I would be directing one, the Pierce brothers would be directing one, and Dave Parker would be directing one. I think it's pretty insane, but why not? And it would be called the Raise Hellathon, and we'd want to make $6,666,000 to make 3 horror films. And of course, you all would be front and center for the whole process. I don't know if that can be done, to be honest. That's a huge, lofty goal. Veronica Mars, the movie, only made $5 million, and that was Veronica Mars. I don't know if we can do that. It might be a fool's errand, but you know what? As William Shatner said in Free Enterprise, but I had to try. So there you go. Pappas V or Pappas 5 says, "Hello, Rob. Did you ever see The Present? It's on Netflix and shows a great story about the Palestinian crisis. I'm not political because it's too divisive right now, but any thoughts?" I have not seen it. Look, my thoughts about the crisis are, I believe in a 2-state solution. I think the Palestinians should absolutely have their own state. Unfortunately, they have been unwilling to bend or compromise over the last 50 years. I mean, more than that, let's face it, 70 years. And I would like to see that solution implemented, but it has not been easy. And it's difficult, unfortunately, until Hamas, they're governed by a genocidal terrorist organization that in their charter says, well, we're going to kill all the Jews. So, it's hard to have those kinds of negotiations. There haven't been free elections. The Palestinian Authority, I think, hasn't held free elections since 2005 because they're afraid of losing. So Hamas is, now there's a ceasefire. But I do believe in a 2-state solution, and I think that I would love to see that happen. I have not watched that documentary, but look, there needs to be a 2-state solution. That was how it was originally going to be in the first place, but the other Arab states didn't like that, and Israel was attacked. So, and look, I look at it this way. The Palestinians there's Christians, there's Muslims there's all different kinds of people. But I do think that the Jewish homeland, the Jewish state has to exist. But there needs to be a 2-state solution. We need to solve this problem. I don't know if it ever will be solved because there are certain groups that don't want it solved for various reasons. And I think we need to solve it. Justin Toner said, Rob, Kino Lorber made my day yesterday with the announcement of Van Damme's 1993 Hard Target from John Woo coming in 4K, the theatrical and director's cuts, and they're working on new interviews with Woo and the cast. Day one buy for me. I love that flick. I'll buy that too. You know, it was kind of a bummer because I know the work print, the thing that was floating around, they couldn't get that. They even addressed that issue that I was able, you were able to see that. I remember I had a VHS copy of it. So, yeah, it's great. And they are releasing his director's cut. So that is outstanding. Well, listen, everyone, I have to go do some work and at 4 o'clock. So I am going to bring this episode of Robservations, episode number 696. No, pardon me. It's 694. I don't even know what show I'm doing. Robservations 694 to an end. I know it's a short show. We'll be back with the longer show tomorrow. And tonight, don't forget, Robservations Midnighter. Tonight at midnight. Join us. Fun shows. The Midnighter's great. We have a whole different audience. But I want to say thank you to my moderating staff. I want to say thanks to Mike Bodden and the Richard. Justin Toner, Louise X. Sparrow is here moderating. Let's see who else is here. And Justin, let's see, Louise. Maybe there's nobody else here. I don't know. But if there are moderators that I've missed, thank you for moderating and being who you are. I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel via Super Chats and tips. Thank you for that. If you want to write me a letter that I'll read on the show, free of charge, you can go to theburnettwork.net and send me a letter and interact with your fellow imagination connoisseurs. And on that note, I will say, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I would say to all of you, have a better day. And join us tonight for the Midnighter.